Hey Crafty fam, it's Alex Vanover back with DIY Alex, and I am so excited about bringing you this video because you guys were so excited about my last screen printing video that I wanted to bring you a new tutorial in more detail. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to make a screen printing design with multiple colors on the same shirt. So I hope you enjoy that. And if you have any other questions or anything else you want to learn about screen printing, make sure that you tell me in the comments so that I can film a new tutorial for you. And if you're new here, welcome. I'm so glad that you've stumbled on my channel. So thanks for being here. Make sure that you subscribe below and click the bell notification next to subscribe so that you never miss a new upload. Okay, let's get to it. So once you're in Design Space, you're going to add registration marks. That is the key to printing multiple colors on one screen printing design. So I chose rectangles. You can choose any shape that you'd like. And you're going to put 4 of those shapes on the 4 corners of your design. Once you get one the same size, then you can just duplicate the rest so that they look exactly the same. I lined mine up around the 4 corners. You don't have to do that, but you want to make sure that they are a little bit outside your design for the technique that we're going to use later. Then once your boxes are lined up in a way that you're happy with, you want to select all 4 and attach them. Once they're attached, you want to duplicate the registration marks for as many layers as you have. In this case, I have 2. Then you're going to line them up so that they match perfectly. And next, you need to attach all of the same colors to one set of registration marks. So I'm selecting all of my gold layers using the Shift key in the right side panel and selecting one set of boxes or registration marks and clicking attach. Then once that's done, I move those out of the way, and then I click and drag and select everything else left because I only have one more layer, and I attach those as well. After that, you want to make sure that your registration marks line up perfectly and your design looks good. Once you feel like you're ready, you can go ahead and save your design. And once you save, you're ready to move on to the Make It screen. Once you're on the Make It screen, make sure that you turn on Mirror for all of your layers so that you can put your designs on the back of your screen. Then once you're done, you're going to set your machine to whatever setting you use for vinyl, and you're going to cut it out, and then I'll show you what to do next. So the first thing that you're going to do after your Cricut cuts out your designs is we're going to reverse weed them. And that means that I'm going to weed away the parts of the design that I would normally keep so that we can use the vinyl as a stencil. Because remember, before we cut them out, we mirrored them, even though you don't normally do that with vinyl, so that we can put the designs on the back of the screen. If you do get pieces that come up with your vinyl, just watch for them as they come and pull them back off the vinyl and place them the best that you can. And that is when stab and grab tweezers come in handy because you can do surgery on rogue pieces of vinyl. The stab and grab tweezers are by far the best way to get your vinyl unstuck without distorting it. There we go. I will go back and fix that piece. Designs are weeded, I'm going to put the first design on the screen. I'll trim away the excess vinyl around the design so that I'm not wasting any. But you do want to leave somewhat of a border around the design because you're going to have to tape all the areas that aren't covered by vinyl. So first I'm going to put transfer tape over the top. You want to make sure you lay it on the transfer tape as flat as you can. And you also want to make sure that you don't use a super sticky transfer tape because that will make it hard to transfer onto the screen. So this is the 651 vinyl medium tack transfer tape, and that's our best seller. That is one of my absolute favorites. It's one that I found doesn't make it quite as difficult. I typically use the blue grid transfer tape that's also medium tack, but it seems to have a little stronger tack and can be hard to put on the screen. Now I'm going to flip my design over and burnish it really well and get as many wrinkles out of it as I can. The most important place to remove wrinkles is around your design. These boxes are just going to be the registration marks, so they don't matter if there's wrinkles in the vinyl around them. So then I'm going to remove the vinyl's backing. And I'm going to transfer my design onto the back of my screen. So the front always says Speedball, so you want to make sure you flip it over to the back. And my design is 10 inches wide, so I decided to flip my screen sideways for this design. Move it up just a bit. There we go. Then I'm going to flip it over and burnish it from the front as well. Then I just need to remove the transfer tape. And you want to do this nice and slowly so that if you need to push your vinyl back down, you can. For whatever reason, I always burnish a little too well, and I always have trouble getting this off of the screen. But it's still a lot easier with the clear medium tack versus the blue grid medium tack. And since you can see there are some wrinkles because I struggled to get the vinyl off of the transfer tape, I'm going to flip over my screen one more time and burnish it so that I make sure the contact is really good. And I'm checking around the letters to make sure that the contact with the screen is really good. If you have some bubbles in your design or around your design, it's not a big deal. But basically, if you have spots around your letters where there are lumps or bumps, you can end up with some bleeding with your screen printing ink. So before I apply the painter's tape to all the borders around my registration marks, I'm going to line up my design on my shirt so that I make sure that everything is in line. Make sure that you press your shirt at least a little bit where the design is going to be so that there's not a bunch of wrinkles underneath your transfer. Okay, so now that I'm happy with where the screen is, I'm going to go ahead and apply my painter's tape to all the areas where the vinyl isn't touching the screen. Have to rip a small piece out of this one. It doesn't need to be neat or pretty, it just needs to cover the screen. And you just want to make sure that you're not covering any of your design with your tape. You can get it super close, but you just don't want to get it to cover. Put like a half a piece over top my registration marks because there's just a little bit of shirt showing up top. Once you completely cover your screen with painter's tape, then you're going to take index cards and put them underneath each of the registration marks. But make sure they're not showing through your design. These are going to be a marker for us to place some ink so we can line up our next layer without putting ink on our shirt. So make sure that you don't see it through any corners of your design. And then you're going to take a piece of painter's tape and put it on each index card so that they don't move around. You also can use painter's tape underneath your registration marks, but I like the idea of using index cards better because that way you have more space underneath the registration marks in case there's any bleeding. All right, so now we're ready to add some ink to our design. So I am going to use this squeegee. This is my favorite type of squeegee that Speedball makes. It has kind of a silicone bottom with a plasticky top, which I think is really neat. And then I bought these baskets from the not Dollar Tree, from the Walmart pantry organization section. They're 3 for 96 cents, and they are the perfect width for your squeegee so that you don't get ink all over the place in between your colors. So I always like to use a plastic spoon or fork to get my ink out just because I'm going to throw it away when I'm finished. And what you want to do is you want to line the top of your design with a fair amount of ink. You want to make sure that you have enough to get to the bottom. You can add more if you don't, but it's nice to start with everything you need. And there's virtually no waste with screen printing because you can wipe most of this back into your container. So don't worry about using too much. So I'm just going to dab a bunch of this up here. Try to get it relatively even, but okay. So now I'll set this aside and it's time to squeegee. So I like to hold my squeegee down with one hand. And I'm gonna drag it down, and I'm gonna keep going up to down on my screen. I'm not gonna go in multiple directions. And I'm applying even pressure to both sides of my squeegee. There we go. I gotta cover this bottom section of my design a little bit better. You can go over your design a couple times, but you don't want to go over it excessively. You're looking to make sure that you don't have any clumps in the middle or anything like that. You just want it to look really nice and even. And I'm making sure to cover my registration marks so that in the next layer, I will know how to line up my boxes. Need to wipe some of this off so that I can get that line out of the middle of my design. So now that there aren't any more lines in my design, I'm gonna stick my squeegee back in my basket for a minute, and I can remove my first screen. And it looks great. And these registration marks are left over for my next layer. So I'm gonna go and wash out my screen in my kitchen sink, and the way that I like to do that is I'm gonna have to peel everything off, the vinyl and the tape, and then I'm gonna use the sprayer in my kitchen sink to spray off all of the ink, and that will give this some time to dry, and I'll be right back. So before I start working on my next layer with my screen, I noticed that the bottom of my end got a little messed up. So I'm just using a really fine paintbrush and my screen printing ink to touch that up. Okay, that looks pretty good to me. So I'm gonna set this shirt aside a little bit while it dries, and I will probably also hit it with the heat gun to speed up the drying process. But in the meantime, I will get my second screen ready. Before I add transfer tape to this piece of vinyl, I'm going to trim the edges again. So something I'm going to try this time to make the transfer tape easier to apply to the screen is I'm only going to burnish with my fingers. So now I'm just going to push my transfer tape around my letters with my fingers the best that I can. I've done this before and it makes it a lot easier to transfer your transfer tape onto your screen. You guys, I just poked a hole in my screen. I can't believe I did that. Luckily, you can buy other screens on Amazon, so that's not a big deal. But for the time being, I'm going to tape it on both sides with painter's tape just so that I don't get any seepage of my ink. I'm going to tape it on both sides, but that's what crafting is all about, right? Just making mistakes and figuring out how to fix them. All right, so I'm going to take my vinyl off of its backing and place it on the back of the screen. That made it so much easier. Thank God I have registration marks to go by on my shirt so that I don't have to worry about using this section of my screen. And now that I want to firmly press my vinyl onto my screen, I'll use a squeegee again. That was also a much less intricate design, so it's much easier to transfer to the screen. So now I'm going to go ahead and tape up the sides around my vinyl. Alright, so now I'm ready to line up my registration marks and do my second layer. So now I'm just going to line up all 4 of my registration marks on my screen with the registration marks that I left behind in the last layer. When they are perfectly lined up, I will know that my design is going to fit together perfectly. So you can see gold through all 4 of my boxes, which is perfect. So then I'm just going to do the same thing I did before. This is a much less intense design, so I'm not going to use nearly as much, but I want to make sure that I don't leave any spots bare. So hold down the screen with one hand and go for it. So it looks good after one swipe, but I'm going to do a couple of more in the same direction. And I can see a little bit of clumpiness going on, so I'm going to swipe over one more time. And that's it. So I will wipe my ink back into my jar, and then I'll pull off my next screen. I got a little bit on my sleeve there, but that's okay. I will get that off before it dries. And it looks great. There's a couple of spots where the vinyl may have stuck to the screen a little bit, but it kind of gives it that distressed look, and I like it. So I always clean off my screen really quickly because that way I don't leave any stains or anything behind on that. And after my design is completely dry, so I like to let it sit overnight if possible, just to make sure that even the thicker parts are completely dry, I will heat set this in my heat press at 320 degrees for 40 seconds. And that's it. That's all it takes to screen print multiple colors. I'm Alex Vanover with DIY Alex, and if you guys like screen printing, make sure that you come back and check out DIY Alex. If there's other kinds of videos and tutorials you'd like to see, make sure you tell me in the comments. Let's craft again soon.